Say what you know.
Hey everybody, welcome to our lunchtime star guest appearance. So, graduate students and faculty and friends and colleagues, thanks for being here. So we know the kind of container of this event, which has been the American Cultures Engaged Scholarship Program, but more broadly, how do we think and learn from the kinds of community-based practices that faculty, partners, and students have been engaging with, right? And one of the people that is a light in this world that has taught many of us and we're all inspired by, I can't tell you how many students come up to me and say, have you heard about Brandi Summers? And really drives the intentionality and accountability of how community-based partnerships really come into life and what we can expect and hope from them. Brandi was also a member of the American Cultures Senate Committee that got to review all of the AC courses that went through, and I miss her dreadfully. Those smarts are not replicable. Brandi's work with Mums for Housing has particularly inspired students to think about their local and what it means to be here in the Bay Area and surrounded by communities that some people come from in the classroom and others don't. And so, Brandi, I just want to thank you for what you do every day, all the time, and the hard work you put into just providing inspiration for so many of us. So thank you for being with us. I asked you to read your bit bio.
No, I don't like that. Oh, thank you. I much prefer that. We do this all the time. No, I really do appreciate you, and you are always my biggest supporter. So I'm feeling low, I can just come to Victoria and you make me feel good. So thank you. And to American Culture, I was very vocal on that committee, so I'm sure that might have had something to do with it. And I always felt bad because I was just coming in to Berkeley and I didn't know much, and so I'm looking at these still let's do this. And so I tried to keep quiet. Sometimes it's like, no, I can't. I just have to respond. So I appreciated it because it helped me build, I think, a more tailored syllabus, which actually I was coming after Seth, who also had won an award, who had all of this popularity around teaching this course, and so I didn't know how to match or come close to what he was doing and all the wonderful things I had heard from the students about you.
He's blushing, can you see?
Yeah, I mean it. It was I was really trying to figure out really kind of how to match your energy and really kind of add my own spin to it, as I knew you were going to continue to teach other AC courses. So
you should know that syllabus got kicked back once.
Did it?
Yeah, that's true.
Really?
Our committee's mean.
Rightfully so.
Yeah.
But it was,
Interesting. Well, I changed a lot then. So anywho, yes, I'm glad to be here. And also, I've had the staff as students for social justice be in the class as well, and that was really nice. Yeah. So that's been a great experience. I mean, it was on when we were on Zoom, but still, yeah, it's been really lovely. So I appreciate being asked to chat. I did write down the questions that you mentioned because I can just ramble and I don't want to do that. So I want to think about the questions and make sure I address them, and then I'll share them with you all, and then we can have a chat. So I won't take up too much time. So the first question is around my work as it relates to anti-racist public writing and as a public project. So it's interesting, I think, because both in academia and more so as we think about the public and public cultures, the concept of anti-racism has become more and more popular, especially post the 2020 racial reckoning. And, I never really used that term or idea in any of my work previously because I think what I'm doing is inherently anti-racist and not, it's a given. And so to add an additional layer in terms of, which in some ways I think complicates it, right? Because what work, especially amongst, let's say, some of my colleagues, isn't anti-racist, what is it? Right? And so I think oftentimes to be legible to communities outside of academia, sometimes it requires us to actually say those words. I can also be more specific and say I acknowledge or at least highlight anti-Blackness in ways that operates globally. but certainly through multiple processes and practices in the United States. So, the work I'm doing absolutely is informed by, I'm trained as a sociologist, but working in geography. And I say this, I never say never, but I would never work in another sociology department. And not because I don't think the discipline is incredibly valuable. And again, I was trained through it, but it's just the limits are too constricting for me in the discipline, where it's very clear when someone is and is not a sociologist. And I think that there are rules around that I don't necessarily follow ever. So in geography, I think I have more breathing room. When thinking about Black studies, I have more breathing room and can actually do both public work, and again, to be legible to multiple audiences, and then also legible in the academy. Sometimes I honestly don't care. And so it's kind of like whoever takes it up, and I'm often kind of surprised by who takes it up. So I don't even see it as public versus the academy, because then there's also again, electeds, there's policymakers, there's organizers, right? There's different publics. And I've also been really surprised and excited about how those different publics have taken up the work that I'm doing. I think, I don't write, when I wrote my book, the first book, it's an academic book. And I remember getting reviews on Goodreads complaining that it's dense and it's hard to get through. And what does neoliberalism mean and why do we care? But the messaging I thought was actually something that was very easy to see, just in terms of our experiences in different cities, but specifically to Washington, D.C. And then I have had the amazing opportunity to write for large public platforms like The Times and like Boston Globe and other online journals and media outlets, to where those processes are so funny when they edit you to nothing. You write something and it's completely different by the time it gets printed, but it's still a process where you have to understand, again, how to make yourself legible and still hold on to the points that matter the most. So again, I don't necessarily see it as anti-racist. I think I do try to combat anti-Blackness, but it's something, again, that's inherent in the work. I don't even know if I answered the question, but that's what I'm sticking with. Secondly, in terms of integrating teaching and scholarship, and I think that's really important, how I balance community needs, requirements, and agency with academic imperatives like university timelines. I mean, that's a huge topic, especially when I'm teaching my graduate students. I think in all of my classes, I do some form of professional development, regardless of whether I'm supposed to or not. And in part, that's sharing with them some of my own experiences on the market, at conferences, being a reviewer, being on editorial boards, being asked to do things that I don't want to do on this campus and outside, and how I handle that. I think they need to know. And also my subject position. So me being a Black woman in the post-racial reckoning is a different meaning than it was in 2019 and before. And then now that it seems to be waning, that also has, we're in a kind of different conjuncture, and who I am and how I show up is going to be very different in different spaces. So I try to be as clear about, I'm Gen X, and so I've been through a number of iterations in terms of, again, meaning, and what I mean and the work that I'm doing, what it means, and recognizing that there's a point at which how I do things may not be popular, or how I do things may not be the way that people want me to do things, right? So where that relates to teaching and scholarship, and really I think the model of American culture is so good for this, where we have to actually do integrated work that's not just add-on. Like a lot of the syllabi that I rejected was they got a week on women, they got a week on Latinx populations, they got a week on queer people, right? No. So it makes faculty and graduate students have to relearn how to talk about these things. And I think some of the suggestions that we would make to the faculty, they didn't like, because that's not how they were trained, or that's not how they teach. And if this is not a continuing learning environment, I don't know what is. We're all constantly learning how to teach over and over again. And I share that with my students. Like, I don't know everything. They teach me a lot. I change my syllabus a lot. Like, I want to keep moving and reaching them. And they are getting younger and younger, and I'm not following, and I'm trying to incorporate the things so they can hear me. What that also means is, you know, and in some ways it's taboo, but I teach my work. And part of it is because you don't get many opportunities to talk to the author, and you don't get many opportunities to find out what they meant when they wrote the book or wrote an article. And so it's having them learn when they impart their own knowledge, or when they're reading something and their interpretation isn't wrong, it's just an interpretation, but let's understand where it fits, what conversations are being had. So I encourage them to listen to interviews, like, you know, Books Network or New Books Network and all those podcasts are out now where they're interviewing people who write books, and it helps to really situate the work. And it's also a form of listening and analyzing and being able to incorporate these kinds of tools as they're trying to perform research tasks. But with, you know, because I, like with the project that I'm doing with Moms for Housing that Victoria mentioned, that was part of a grant with Mellon. And, you know, it's interesting because that experience was illuminating on several levels. One, with dealing with the institution. A lot of things I just don't know. And so I didn't know that there are calls for people to submit pre-proposals and they get selected by the university to be put forward. I didn't know about that. I know I didn't get selected for that, so I was like, well, let me go call a friend and see if I can slip, you know, a proposal under someone's door and get it that way. It worked, but then because I did it backwards, I had to go back and do all the things that I was supposed to do on the front end and dealing, like, I didn't know what percentage the university was supposed to take. I didn't know 10 even. Whoa. But Mellon has some rules around that, so they're just like, no, you guys can't do that. But I didn't know to write in for a program manager. I didn't know. I just knew that I was trying to get a certain project done, and I needed a lot of money. So that was kind of how it operated. And on the one hand, it really helped me understand. I told myself I would never apply for another grant, but of course I've applied for many grants since then. But now I know the proper procedures. And so in working with community, one of the reasons why this grant was so good is that they were more focused on giving money to the organization rather than the university. So that meant that it wasn't for my summer salary, it wasn't for any money for me, it was all for hiring either students and or folks working in the community, or just money going to them. So I could pay for their website development, I could pay for, you know, a number of activities to take place as it was supporting them. The thing about, I think, with institutions, again, I keep mentioning legibility, but it just has to be legible to the institution. And the one thing, I mean, just like code switching in terms of having different ways that you speak at home and at work, you also have to code switch on paper. So when you're doing work with various communities, I don't bring my academic self, I bring a person who's born and raised in East Oakland who's trying to better understand what I can do after being gone for 20 years. And then I don't address the needs from the institution when I'm in conversation with them, right? It's just what do you need? What resources can I provide? What research can my students jump in on because they love it? Like, what can we do for you? And that's literally how we operate in that space. But then with the institution, in terms of deadlines, in terms of promotion, in terms of all the other requirements I have, there's a way of the code switch is, well, we are putting on community workshops. Students are invited because they want them there. It's not because I'm forcing it. We put on events. We're making a film. We're doing all of these things that have material, that are material and that I can demonstrate as research. Because it is research, right? And there's a pedagogical component to where I call this a service and teaching project rather than a research project. Because my intention isn't to take it and write a book about it. If my students can, if they want, but my intention is to teach them how to perform research, to be conscious and ethical collaborators, to be able to write up stuff, to be able to manage their time, to be able to be professional in how they connect with folks, to be confident in what they're doing, to be intrepid and to be brave. And I don't know a better way to do that than to have them work with a powerhouse community organization that's worldwide and just known globally for their work. Like they're starstruck and they're honored, and the moms are so proud of them, and they're just so happy and excited and love work. So this is a match made in heaven. I couldn't have planned it better, and I didn't even know it. And at the same time, I can make that legible to the institution by making this real true connection. And it is true. So we form full relationship with them that don't have anything to do with the institution, that we get to keep precious because it's separate and it's lasting. No matter when they graduate, they will still be able to call Sam and go over to her house for dinner because of the bonds that they made. It's not extractive. We're not getting anything in that sense from it except that bond in that community. And so I think there are a lot of ways, and this kind of the neoliberal institution, neoliberal university wants to individualize us and make us just experts to go into these communities, take, and then present it to the world. But that's not how I work, and then that's not how I'm teaching, I guess, my students to work either. That's not what they're out here to gain, but they still can be conversant in the ways that are necessary. So neoliberalism, and again, the neoliberal institution takes away community. It destroys collaboration and community. And despite a call for collaboration on the research end, it's really you operate in silos. The university doesn't teach you how to work together. And so you have to build that outside of the institution. And that's what I think I'm trying to do closely. So yeah, I've done okay in terms of timelines, and also having tenure does help to be able to. I don't even know what walls I might have been running up against actually, but I just kind of go anyway, and then no one said no yet, so it's just kind of working out. So yeah, how community work gets valued or not by the university, I think it depends. I think the university, and this is general, not just UC Berkeley, but the university generally wants to show a commodity, like it's something that they can show everyone that they're doing this. I mean, this is the same thing with foundations, no one's the same way. So there are parts, again, that are precious that they can't touch, and I don't think those are the things that are valuable, but excuse me, when you're trying to get funders or donors, I gave a talk to some alums that are I think it was homecoming or something, so there were alums and parents weekend. It was parents weekend, and like I got why they wanted me to present it. And so afterward, the parents were, they're so excited that their kids get access to real work and the community, and wow, it's sexy. And so I think the university values the ability to do that. Again, for me, I love the kids, so it's like I love teaching their children. I love opening their eyes widely. They may not understand. I have a more progressive agenda at all times, so I don't know that they know that. But at the same time, it's great to see how it reverberates outside. But ultimately, no. I mean, I think, and we've seen this, there have been plenty of people in multiple institutions who don't get tenure when they do too much service work, or they do too much community work. It's happened here too. But then especially women and people of color receive the burden of the service work. I have more service than I want to admit. That's been at both the institutions that I've worked at, where I just took on a lot. And we also take on most advising and mentoring. So we are parents, therapists, friends, comrade. We're all those things in one for a lot of students. And part of it is, what I do love about here is that we have so many transfer students. And so seeing them where they're coming from a variety of different backgrounds, some of which are my age or had similar backgrounds to me. So I understand what it's like and what they're doing and what they're running up against. So I want to help those people. I want to be the support system. I'm not great at boundaries, so I'm trying to figure out how to do that. And those are the things I don't necessarily believe the institution values. It doesn't accrue capital, or at least money capital, in the ways that I think the institution. I think it's interesting and timely that we have an economist now as our new chancellor. So, all of that also tells us, I don't know this gentleman and I'm not saying anything negative. I'm just saying in terms of where we are, a Goldman Sachs, MIT trained economist who ran a business school makes sense given our fiscal situation right now. And so what that means is in terms of value, the kinds of things that don't bring money capital, aren't necessarily going to be the things that are valued the most. So that's just a reality, and it's not just here. It's everywhere. That's where we are. And then doing this work in our current highly politicized environment. I don't think about that. So I think if I worked in Alabama, it would be a completely different story, or Florida. I wouldn't have a job. So I mean, I couldn't probably. Yeah, I know I couldn't. So it doesn't do anything to or for me. I've talked to some of my friends and colleagues about the fact that I'm not one who is. I'm at the age in my situation where I'm not going to be out there pounding the pavement on the streets the way that I think some of the young folks are doing. I cannot go to prison. I have a baby, and I don't want to go. So instead, I'm training people to find out where they want to be in the world, how they want to approach the world, and being critical about how they see the world, so they can make decisions about how they want to be out there, whether they want to pound pavement, whether they want to be more involved in strategy, whether they want to have knowledge production and development, whether they want to be planners and do the kinds of work that helps cities thrive. But I have to give them a foundation so they can at least approach this work critically and then decide what they want to do. And they have the right to protest. They have the right, they have all of those rights, and I want them to exercise it at their discretion, but knowing what the consequences are and yet what the stakes are as well. So the highly politicized environment, I don't think would stop me from doing, or hasn't stopped me from doing that kind of work where that's my job. My job is to teach, the full human and to help them become, as their frontal lobes are developing and finalizing in terms of development, I want to be able to be a part of that development, not to tell them what to think, but how, how to weigh different things, how to question something that doesn't make sense and then find out how to answer the question. I don't know the answer, but I can give you tools of figuring out how to get there, so we can talk about that more. And so they can, so the highly politicized environment and the ways that media is an institution, an ideological institution, can help them not just passively be consumers and instead be active in how they engage with the world. So yeah, that was all the questions. But I love to talk and have a conversation with everyone if that's possible. So that'd be good.
Who wants to throw that hat in the ring? I'll shoot off then. We're sitting in the Department of Ethnic Studies, so maybe I shouldn't say this. I'm kind of jealous when I look at the geography department.
Really?
Yeah, because from the outside looking in, it really feels like there's an infrastructure and intention about how to do this work, build it, and scaffold it. So we hear from a lot of students, right, that they enter an undergraduate class, maybe it's an AC class, they have partnerships really written into the body and ethos of the class. And then where do I go next? Oh, here's a place where you go next. And here's where the faculty are around those next stages. So it feels like you've got an intentional structure. Am I just making it up?
No, I mean, I think most recently, with most recent leadership, so you know, Javon has vision. That if there's one thing he has is vision. So I don't
know this person, I just like the
oh, okay. So he's been able, I think, to implement a lot of the things that he's been trying to do even prior to me coming, and making it so that organizing us in a way that the campus can see us finally, right? before it seems as though like some of your advisors and mentors, it was like standalone people that were just superstars, and folks would come here for them, right? Whereas I think now there might be people who are popular on campus, but it's also our areas of focus are interesting and exciting for students. So it's not just us; it's what we're doing that they get to see. Do you think so, Seth? That you've been here longer.
I mean, it's interesting from my perspective because it's siloed in a way because I don't always know the realm of things occurring, like in terms of some of the planning, but I do think with your work and also Javon's created amazing space for us to have a firm footing and just support to do our own things that collectively provide some of these opportunities and a real foregrounding of collaborative work and experiential learning and things like that. So I mean, I just feel so proud and privileged to be a part of our scene with Brandi and everyone. So
yeah, it's been cool. I don't know how it is everywhere else. So I mean, I've told a lot of my students I like poaching students from other departments, and I've been successful. So
Yeah, you have.
I know. Because I think sometimes there's a flexibility in geography, not just Berkeley geography, but geography, where a lot of the questions that graduate students have are spatial, they just don't know it. And so being able to bring them and understand kind of relations and spatial relations better, not just spatial terms within different disciplines. And you know this, you're a geographer, so it helps you, I think it's interesting, and how we do it is interesting because of the discipline. I think a lot of it has to do with that.
Good question. You were talking about how the kind of political landscape of what we're in does not affect or like you try not to let it affect your content for teaching, but I'm curious how it affects how students, the conversation students are having in the classroom. There's this feedback loop of like the media blowing up. Singular examples and making it feel much bigger than it is, but then that affects how students think the classroom is. And so, I'm curious.
I think that's a great question, and it's also a reason why I decided to add sections to 70AC, the Urban Experience course, because I was finding that teaching heavy topics, especially in the post-2020 era, couldn't be done in 100-person classroom, right? So I needed to add an extra credit or unit, and then have there be sections, and then train graduate students on how to have those conversations or encourage them to talk about certain topics in their sections. So like every week providing them with, okay, this is what I'm focusing on, so build off of that, and then if you want separate assignments or if you want to do your own thing, cool, but they probably need to know a little bit more about racial formation, and they probably think they know what racial capitalism is, but they don't. So let's spend more time there. And so, in a lot of ways, the classes are so one thing I also say is that I don't operate as if time is linear, like a straight line. It's like these cycles. And so if I teach them how the past informs this present, then they can use those theories and frameworks to be able to analyze what's happening now. Nothing that's happening now is new. So if they understand that, and we can mark a time in history where something similar based on the socio-political conditions were like it, then they can use that hat to figure out what's going on now and not respond reactively when they read stuff in the news. And we had this, so I remember like when COVID was we were in the classroom, in January, February, and it's starting to shift, but we saw there was this panic that was occurring where there was a lot of xenophobia, racism against Asian Americans, all of Asia, essentially, right? And so to be able to pull papers from France, pull papers from Germany and the US, and to be able to discuss the Chinese Exclusion Act, or to just show them newspapers from the 1920s, or no, 1880s, and to show in San Francisco, this is similar. So what are we doing about it, and how do we inform ourselves so we don't act in a reactionary way? So it's more so making this everything mundane. No matter what's exceptional, just make it real. Yeah, we've seen this before, haven't we? Give me an example of how. What frame are we using to understand this? And so it brings it so it's not like hysteria when something happens.
A question.
Yeah.
So I feel like there's a lot of, good intentions in various departments on campus about, community engagement and all of this stuff, but like there are actual skill sets that are required to do this work responsibly.
That's right.
And so I just wonder, in your departmental context, is there a sort of formal concerted effort to like reskill faculty and make sure that people know how to enter or be supportive of colleagues who are doing this kind of work? Or is it more just sort of like people who are so moved will do the right thing and educate themselves in order to enter properly?
Short answer is no. And I think that's actually come up since I did a colloquium presentation of this project in October, and it was great. It was attended by so many people, which was amazing. And what makes our department unique is that we're kind of bifurcated between the Earth System Sciences and Human Geography, and then kind of the geospatial in the middle-ish. So I guess it's not bifurcated, but it's a challenge to figure out where we have these folks who are positivists, and then we're on the opposite end over in human geography, and then Clancy's kind of like not in the middle really. She's the vector weird. So anyway, it's the kinds of work we do is very different, and I think that was actually part of Javon's vision to bring us more to that kind of thinking, but it hasn't necessarily worked. And I think that what I found when I did the presentation in October, and I brought moms with me, like I had them kind of meet and talk, they didn't realize what it took. So they came to me like, are there ways we can collaborate? Or, oh, I can offer this.
Yeah.
Can we do this together? And I'm like, that sounds amazing. I never would have known that because I don't know how to do soil testing and that kind of stuff, right? And so they got giddy and excited about and then started telling me more about their research. And I was like, wow, this is fascinating. I didn't know you did that because I don't know what that is, but I love that you explained this to me. Gosh, did you ever think about gender and then how he's like, actually, I've been reading more about it, right? So I think part of it has to do with the fact that we're now sharing more about what we're doing, and it's enabled us to be vulnerable around those areas that we don't really know much. But with the community engagement and that piece around ethical engagement, I still think there's a long way to go department-wise. We had a new graduate student, a PhD student who came in, and they were saying that they were surprised that there wasn't more community-engaged work, and they figured the kind of work I'm doing would have been common, like that everyone was doing it. It's like, nope, not at all, actually. And you're right, I think the skill is what's required. However, for years, I'd say decades, there was this belief that you didn't need the skill, you just needed the knowledge, and you go into those communities. And that's not working anymore. So in that part about whether the university values it, I don't think so. Not that part, especially the training. It's the soft skills that aren't operationalized in a way, and they're not. I guess it's still empirical, so I don't understand why it's not valued. But yeah, no.
Can I add to that? Which is that, the ACES program was built to kind of fill that gap, and yet, so the university wants to scale everything, right? And we're like, no, honestly, there are some people and students who should not be in those relationships, right? It may take a dozen years for good intentions to turn into good skills. And often the community partners that you work with, they have a smell test. They know when there's some bullshit in the room and what your intentions are. But it's been really hard to create intentional, robust, resourced places for that skill development. And so when it comes to teaching, Brandi knows this, and lots of us in this room know this, but when you do this work, it's not a 4-unit class, right? It takes so much longer, and yet the teaching credit doesn't change for it. The units that the students don't get doesn't change for it. We're still kind of metric by the university thinking about education as one size fits all.
Yeah.
So this hasn't been given the room to go. But I wanted, Bhavija, if you wanted to add in, because this idea of like sharing your faculty colleagues, like really interested, but there's also a kind of an appropriation that's going on with this sexy work at the same time. Did you want to share?
Yeah, with my doctoral work, which was like a community science project, we tested homes, and I'm from engineering, so I had to sort of learn, and now I'm in this whole different space of doing scholarship. And at the end, so my work is in Newark, New Jersey, but I'm from New Jersey, and I got to like stay with my parents and do the work, but there's universities that are local that I reached out to participate, earlier on when I needed resources, even just like simple laboratory equipment. And now that the project's over, they want the data, or they invited me and the community, well, not me, actually. They invited the community organization, and they invited me because they were like, Risha, like, you're the person to present there, and it's like the showpiece. And yeah, it's really frustrating because it's popular now, right? Like post-2020, it's popular to do community-engaged research. And I was like, but you weren't there from the start, and now and applying for grants with this org. And so the lines get blurry, right? Like building capacity to do future research, but how the future research is done because it's now popular to do community-based research. It's really disheartening.
Yeah, I'm sorry. And I think that's where the needs of the group comes first, or taking their temperature, like you said, they have a smell test, but sometimes they don't, and they just want to do good, and so it's more so, how am I helping them? And see, this is where power and privilege and all those things come into play, because you can't just say, well, screw you guys, like, I'll just do this on my own. You need resources, you need support, so this is where the inequality becomes really stark. And I couldn't have done the work that I'm doing, honestly, without tenure. So I can dictate how the money's spent. I can get money. Like, I've learned that now, once you get money, you can get more. And you have to first get money, and then you've proven yourself, and then everybody else wants to give you money, right? And so I can do that, and this actually has to do with students generally. So you're a graduate student, and so you need a job, and you need money, and all of these things. Well, as faculty, like, I have to find pots of money for my students just so you can pursue what you want to do that's outside of my project. And so I do see in a lot of the sciences, hard sciences, that faculty that are leading projects, so not yours, but like if you're on a team, you're fulfilling their needs just to get your name second on an article, rather than you being able to kind of create your own space. And so that's a bigger issue. But I do wonder if you can say no sometimes.
Well, yeah, I think so. The executive director's name's Anthony. Anthony and I work really close together, and so I can be. He said like He's told me I've helped him navigate like academia more, but his sniff test is really good. Like he can read through it, but I think he's more maybe mature than I am right now in terms of working. He's like, I have to work with Rutgers, like they're the local institution, and that's who I have to work with. So he's like, yeah, I don't trust some of these people, but I need institutional resources. So I can't work with UC Berkeley or across the country. So,
right. So you'd have to be finished in order to regain that. It's horrible. and this is how the work doesn't move, right? And then when we get institutions in bed with these organizations, and it's not actually doing the work that you set out to do, and that is depressing. And then it's also where you have to be creative. And so I'm very creative in finding ways of doing things on the side, or like, if I can help this person do this, then I'm going to find a way to do it. And part of it, so for example, if you're working with different community orgs and they're individuals, right? So I'll use the example of Moms for Housing. They're new, right? Like they weren't an organization. They were a group that organized, but they were not an organization. And so they're a baby organization. And for a lot of them, they're getting a lot of media exposure. and opportunities that they've never had before. One of them, Dawn, was just in Spain giving talks on housing and human right? So what I can do is help her with talking points. I can help her get a proper honorarium. I can help her go over her the notes, like when the media wants to interview, give them the things that they need to say rather than because there are ways that the media tries to spin them as like, these horrible people who took over a property. So help them have like the party line, like say this all the time, just keep saying this, right? So there are ways I can offer my expertise that don't have to do with the exchange of money, but instead it definitely makes me feel better, but also to help them because the guidance from an institution that's trying to take from them may not provide that. And it's not something I write on my CV that I help them, it's just, this is part of the work. And so when you're doing work that deals with communities, that's part of the work too. Like, it's you offering your skills. So even though the bad guys are coming in and taking, there are ways that you can still form a relationship and offer them things that help you build trust and to help you, like it's helping you too. Like in a way, it's like learning. You're learning through that process. You're having to articulate things differently. You're learning how to make these academic sounding things, and I especially think with engineering. So like to make it sound like something that I could talk to my mom about or whatever, and that's a skill as well. So you're not using them, it is really collaboration, and you're trying to get them what they need and what they may not know is possible because you've actually seen the other side. Yeah.
Follow up to that, how much of this conversation around the nitty gritty and the navigating ethical gray areas is a part of the conversation in the class that students have to learn from?
It depends on the class. So I don't teach this in class. Like I don't teach a method. I would teach it in a methods class. And still recognizing where again people have to recognize who they are and where they are, and so I do it in my group meetings with my team. So I work with 12 students now, and it grew. I thought I would have 4 because that's what I put in money for, and so 2 graduate students and 2 undergraduate students. That's what I thought. But then the beauty of this campus is there's URAP, there's work study, there's all of these different combinations and ways to help get students paid, right? And then there were students who were like, I just want to be a part of this. And I just want to be a part of it. And I'm like, I don't feel good about you doing work without getting paid. So we got to figure out how this is going to be research or something that you can use later. And so that ends up being my classroom. And it's not just on campus because we've done sessions in the Oakland Public Library, we've done it in a church, and we have meetings and discuss all of these things. Let's review, and process is also important to this. So the outcome ends up being process. So, and this is the plug, but on April 26th, we're having an event at the MCC. From 1 to 3, where we're going to do a showcase to see what we did over these 2 years. And so I've asked them to, one, they're all responsible for these different areas, and then we're, printing out images, showing the film that they made. Trust me, I did not start this thinking that there would be a film. One of my students said we should do a film, and I said, I don't know how to do a film, so you need to go figure out how to do a film. And then I will introduce you to filmmakers, I will introduce you to funders, but I can't do it, let's go. And that's happened. And now they may actually be able to have it at the Oakland Museum. And there are all these ways that I can facilitate, and that's the learning. That's not gonna be in a classroom. Me CCing them on the email that I'm sending to somebody that I just met once. Hey, I have a student who's really interested in doing film work. I know we just met, but hey, can you talk to them? And so they see how I'm corresponding, how they're responding. That's learning. That's not in the classroom. And so I think that's why I thought this is what grants were supposed to be about, is not just the research, but it's pedagogy. You have to teach people how to do this. They can't just jump in a lab and know what to do, and they're gonna mess up too. And they're gonna get in sticky situations. I've gotten in sticky situations. Whenever you're dealing with a community org, there's stickiness and lots of stuff. So I've had them be present when I've had to iron out some issues, and this is how we handle it. And if you have a problem, I will pick up the phone and call somebody. Like, that's kind of how it works, because it's not personal to me in the sense that if someone's mad at me, I don't care. So I can negotiate, teach them how it works, show them where my power works and then where it doesn't, and all of these things. That's learning. That's on the job training. And so I don't know that I could do that in a class, which is challenging, because I wouldn't write a qualitative methods paper talking about this project. I would not. And I also don't think everyone should do this work.
Exactly.
Just like everyone should get a PhD, everyone should not do this.
You know what I think about? So I'm at the Public Service Center, and I occasionally get calls from faculty who are responding to something, like maybe there's a grant they want to apply for, and I said, you must have an engaged element, so they'll call me up.
Yes.
And I mean, some of the things I get are like, well, I just want their data. Like, do I have to talk to them? Do I have to work with the technicians to get their data? And I'm like, no, we can't do that. Or other things around, like, I just want you to handle that. And we are going to do what we do in our kind of hermetically sealed bubble, right?
Yes.
And it's a partnership. But what you're really pointing out is, one, I think there's that range of depth. Like, what you're doing is like extraordinary.
Thank you. I did not know this all when it started, so let me tell you.
But it's wonderful. But here's the thing: is I don't think we can stop the bad people.
No, we can't.
So it makes me wonder, like, particularly when the university begins lifting it up.
Yeah, exactly.
And encouraging those people to do the work, even though they're not prepared. But one thing you said that made me think about is, I do think faculty are more comfortable learning from other faculty. So I wonder if there's a way in which we can create those kind of environments where faculty who are doing this work can share, hey, this is how you can do this well. Because I don't think it's going to come from an administrator.
I hope not. Yeah, I mean, yes. And also, I want to be clear, it's like, oftentimes it's not bad people because they're doing what they feel like they have to do in order to get the promotion. So it still is very structural. Like, it's not valued, and the communities aren't valued. So that process isn't going to be valued, and they're doing it because they're scared, or they're against their feet are right next to the fire because they have to do something, and this is what they were trained to do, and so they have to find a community to do it in, right? So yeah, it's going to continue, and I hope an administrator doesn't do it, because I think there's a way that with administration you don't get the opportunity to actually do the work anymore. And so maybe, yes, faculty will learn from other faculty, but I do want to be clear, everyone should not do this work. And so I hope, if that's the case, folks realize, oh wait, maybe I shouldn't be the one doing this. Maybe I can do something else, or, maybe I can provide other services, or I think what we've also lost is our role. Like, we provide service, that's what we do as teachers. And I think we lose that when we're R1s, when we're supposed to develop research and have output. We forget that we're supposed to actually give. Like, that's why I think we got it. It's not for the pay, so it's got to be for this commitment that we've made to multiple populations. And so, we should be this is why I think in a lot of cases, like, I'm also interim director at ISSI, and I go to an ORU director's meeting, and it's mostly women, and I'm like, gosh, like, women are the ones taking care of so much of the administrative components of this institution, and aren't getting the chance to be in the field, or aren't getting the chance to do all this work, did all this work to get to the position that they're in. But the care work is still masculinized by how it's managed, right? In terms of different units, and it's very clear cut. And it doesn't make room for the kinds of care that's not necessarily rooted in this kind of individualistic work. So it becomes challenging to rid us of the bad stuff. But if anything, I think I would be open to the idea of having collaborative conversations where it's like, how do you do it? Oh, I do it. I've learned a lot from. But I learn a lot from everybody. So I learn from faculty, I learn from administrators, I learn from students. So
It's sometimes what we say with AC too, is that and we know this from the review that the committee does, is that I've always thought I can get anybody through the review, but I do not want to.
Right.
Okay.
Absolutely not.
Right.
So it has to come from deep intention.
Yeah.
It can't just be from how do I get trained into this.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. Hello. And I think a lot of people in for that committee wanted, like, they knew that it wasn't ready, but they still wanted to help. And
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
but you can do that at the beginning, but then once it actually comes to practice, I don't know what's happening. We don't know what's happening in the classroom, and we can't actually dictate that. And I don't want to, but you know, is there like a feedback besides like the student evaluations, which I hate, but is there feedback on the program, like for AC from students?
Not the program per se, because we don't have assessment structure, but we just did a small pilot study in the fall about how faculty think they develop anti-racism pedagogy and how the students feel that impacts them.
Okay.
So we've been able to do small ones. We just applied to the Spencer Foundation for a $500,000 grant.
Nice. So I realized I double booked or something, and one of my students is like, text me when you're back. Yes, because I'm supposed to have this meeting at 1. But I'm just gonna tell them that just 10 more minutes.
So we've been reflecting on what Brandi's been sharing about the scholarship and teaching engagement. So I'm not sure, I mean, you haven't heard, but did you come with a question you wanted to ask at
Not
this
really.
week?
So, just my understanding that this morning was sort of grad students and some
Yeah.
faculty.
Yes,
Um,
and Brandi was a sandwich.
yeah, I guess, you know, as I mentioned, I'm in art practice, and so I think we have really specific needs and experiences around anti-racism, and the phrase itself is generally not used. Right. It's used to DEI,
Yeah.
and so I think my approach is more anti-racist than it is DEI. Because students are dealing with subjectivity and like their own subjectivity and what they perceive from that, it comes up constantly. Questions about.
That's actually really interesting, the DEI stuff now that DEI BJ or whatever the acronym is now. Because when did was that because from Ibram Kendi's How to Be an Anti-Racist?
I think so.
No. So, you know, sorry. Yeah, and so maybe that's why I don't like it. I think it again the context under which it comes about is it's popular and I think part of it also is being a social scientist and one who is trained in sociology, understanding kind of what racism is and how it has to do with power and how it has to do with time, location, all of these things makes the concept of anti-racism not really work. And so part of that also has to do with the fact that, you know, these are things I have to teach my kid, you know, as she's trying to navigate soon going to middle school, where understanding like prejudice or understanding bigotry, and that's not the same thing as racism. And having her get that, and especially around these questions around DEI, BJ, it's still not necessarily having the kind of outcomes we want. So if you're trying to have people contextualize their identities, to understand who they are and how they show up, and then wanting to make sure they are cognizant, DEI is not going to do that, right? But the concept of anti-racism in the sense that you are aware, you are, again, of your subjects positions, and how you operate in the world is something that's important. Why I resist the can be anti-racist stuff is because it seems more individually based rather than it being structural and temporal, and doesn't necessarily negotiate power and how that impacts whether it's institutions or organizations. And from his belief that, oh, I realized I woke up one day and I'm racist. It's like, no, like this isn't helpful. And so, or to say anybody can be racist, no, then you're taking it out of its context. You're taking the meaning out. And so I need people to, or at least that's what I'm teaching my students, I need them to understand that racialization is a process, that all these formations are processes, and then we have these kinds of outcomes. So it's complicated, it's not neat, and they need to be okay with that because life is not neat. It's very messy.
And some, I think, this conversation is also how the university, we talked about kind of commodification and representation, but how it takes the life out of terms that might have been useful.
Yeah.
So, for example, abolition, right? The term abolition is under duress because of the university, right? So the work that we wanted with abolition cannot be done anymore. And actually revolution is probably the better term, but the university can have abolition, but it can't have revolution, right? Because those two things demand more of a material relationship. So you could also argue that anti-racism cannot happen without anti-capitalism, right? So if we have that relationship, that is not a sliding scale between DEI, BJ, and anti-racism, which is what the university wants us to think, is that, oh, okay, we can be on that spectrum somehow. Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
It's also that the right has taken up,
Yeah.
now claims revolution for itself.
That's right.
It's
Exactly right.
it's the revolution of the right.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
Exactly right. Which is, I think, hard for a lot of people to contend with when they have, they believed in liberalism and wanted a particular outcome based on that. And so I just gave a talk on Zoom, and I never schedule two things in a day, but I did today. This morning I was talking to an urban studies class with Yale Architecture, and they're always fun. Because these questions, I was talking to them about how I love Stuart Hall, and he's my boyfriend in my head, and because I was trained in cultural studies in sociology, and so I love his work and his interpretations of Marx, of Gramsci, of all of these thinkers, and how he talks about time and space, honestly, and race. And so this revolution that's being taken up by the right, I mean, like reading Policing the Crisis allows us to understand how these crises come to be through language, through these ideological kind of positions. And so these architects, they don't know Stuart Hall, and I'm telling them about conjuncture, and I'm talking about all of these ideas that are so important in us understanding what's happening right now, and how you resist it, and how you don't, and how we don't react. And it takes us further right so that the left ends up moving along too, and then this is the point, right? Like they get to the middle, and then the middle is left. And right, so to recognize that, it will help us not react and instead like build instead, or dismantle. So
But we often don't have an opportunity to have such a thick discussion with our students, right? Because also we select students based upon an idea of who Berkeley wants. And part of that is kind of a linguistic representation of experience. So we've already taught them a kind of language that they need to occupy as they arrive here. And then there's not many opportunities to kind of disassemble that, right? Which we might call just political education.
Moms for Housing was actually the second group. I started with another group on the grant, and it didn't work out. Like they weren't moving forward in the way I needed it. And so I had built a relationship with council member Carol Fife, and was talking to her about what I was trying to do. And she was like, why don't you just work with the moms? I was like, oh, I didn't know that was an option. Can you put me in touch? And so I had written an academic article about kind of their strategies and a lot of the public perception and representations of them with my colleague Desiree, but I hadn't engaged them in this kind of conversation. And so once I was able to meet with them and ask what their needs are, and what I saw as potential, then they're like, oh, cool. And also we have some other stuff we want you to do. And so where we had 3 areas of work to do based on my proposal, then there was another area, or actually 2 other areas where they had needed help and didn't have the resources to do the research. And so I just created a 4th area and started doing that work. And that's how I have 12 students that I'm working with. So the kind of institutionalization, how I structured it is, if we're thinking of this as a product that's coming at the end of this, y'all get to keep it. So I don't keep any of this. Like I don't, the film, like it's my students and them. My name is gonna go on it because I'm a PI and all this other stuff, but I didn't make this film. And the moms, we're having a viewing party next weekend at one of the moms' houses so they can provide input on the film. So it's really collaborative, and they get to keep it. So it's institutionalizing and then also allowing them to do whatever they want with what we build together. Because I don't want it to live here. I have been asked whether I want to create a center around this archive that I'm building, and I don't want to. I'd rather have a center on how to reach out to different groups or what this kind of ethical engagement looks like. But I don't want to house the stuff with the moms here. I want them to take it, and then however they need to use it. So I'll give one example, and hopefully I'm answering your question. We are putting together a booklet on, actually now it's a zine because students, on eminent domain, specifically in Oakland, and teaching people about eminent domain. It's something that can just be handed out to folks. So we did a meeting at the mom's house, which is in West Oakland, and we started going through these maps and all these other things so we could teach them how to do this at their community meetings. So when they go to community meetings and organize, they can talk about eminent domain, right? So as we're talking, they keep interrupting with questions because we didn't realize how little of Oakland's history they knew. So that meant, okay, let's go back and figure out what terms do we need to define. Do we need a key to show what all these ideas are, how to define this, how to transition the language into such that's not, again, academic jargon. And then let's reformulate what we're doing with this eminent domain document. And still for people, like we're using university resources to pay for the city. And so, but they get to use it. They get to figure out how they want to incorporate it. They get to talk about it. We certainly can because the process, right? But ultimately it's theirs. And we get their permission on what's on it and like how design, all of these things, and we're presenting it to them. So the institutionalization, I think in a lot of ways gets disrupted because who makes stuff to give away, right? And so if we can use resources provided by either both Mellon and this institution to give them stuff, because they're not going to let us write a check. But what they will let us do is photocopy and hold a symposium and do those kinds of activities, and then, they kept it. Well, yeah, where were we supposed to house it? I don't have an extra office, so there you go. And then also for those individual projects, like I said, the film, the zine, we can look for other pots of money where, again, they don't keep it, they're just investing in the process. And then my students get to learn how to get some grant money and they get to produce something that they feel proud of. Like one of my students was doing a community film and they are now in a film festival and able to show it in a film festival. So we're helping get skills so they can, now it's like, oh my God, now I want to be filmed. Great, let's change your QE. So it's enabling that kind of relationship, and they wouldn't have been able to do that without having this project, without knowing that the product is being given away at the end of the day.
Thank you so much. I just want to be mindful of time. We're at 1:30. How are you doing?
I said 10 minutes. It's been 20. All good. I gotta go. Yeah, I have to go. Actually, it's that student that I was just talking about. I'm supposed to be with them about
We're
their
so
QE.
grateful to have you.
We can talk to you all day.
Thank you.